So, I decided to post a video about why we were so wrong about Sergio Perez and predicted him to be on the podium at the Singapore Grand Prix, and I was wrong. So the weekend started once again with free practice 1 at a track where we all thought Red Bull would struggle, except me. I put my whole faith in Sergio Perez and expected him to deliver. Instead, Sergio Perez went off in the runoff area, which is a brilliant start to the weekend. Lando Norris went over the curbs as he dueled to try and top the session. Max Verstappen also seemed to struggle with his Red Bull, as Sergio Perez locked up for the second time, and I started to realise how wrong I was. The fact that I did a video about Sergio Perez and the fact that I predicted him to be on the podium is going to be something I'm going to keep mentioning throughout this video. Carlos Sainz went also off in free practice 1, 2, but it's a session that basically didn't mean anything, as it would prove as the weekend went on, because Charles Leclerc topped the session in a close fight with Lando Norris. But at least Ferrari will be able to take pole position, right? Right? FP2 kicked underway though, and it was a session that is pretty much realistic of where the teams will be, especially since it's in the night time, which is essentially where the race is set. But then again, Bahrain, Hamilton topped the session, so clearly that doesn't mean anything. Franco Colapinto didn't even know what way to head into the pit lane. It was that hot and humid as he went into the Alpine pit lane. However, who the hell would want to go there in the first place? Carlos Sainz locked up. The race winner from last year was notably struggling. Alongside Carlos Sainz in that big Azerbaijan Grand Prix crash with Sergio Perez, and he was also struggling as again he went off the road. Also off the road was the winner of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri, as he got lost as he tried to get the best out of his McLaren. The same can be said for George Russell. After his famous 2023 last lap crash, George Russell crashed into the barriers in FP2, however it was less fatal as he managed to keep on going. In FP3 we managed to see what a lizard is like in Singapore, as it set a faster lap than any of the kick Saubers. But seriously though, kick Saubers were really off the pace all weekend long, and Joe Guanyu was about half a second off average of Valtteri Bottas, which is great. George Russell slid in his Mercedes and also went off the road, locking up his Mercedes in a car that looked extremely difficult. George Russell would end up second though. After Lando Norris had topped FP2, he looked quick again. Verstappen tried to get the best out of his Red Bull and also looked much happier in it too. Could Verstappen potentially pose a threat come qualifying? Someone who wasn't posing a threat was Alex Albon, after he hit a wall on his FP3 lap and he was trying to get the best and beat his teammate Franco Colapinto. But at the end of the day, Lando Norris was in fine form and looked like the favourite for pole position. But the question was, could Lando Norris take pole position at the Singapore Grand Prix? Q1 was safe to say interesting. George Russell was nearly out in Q1. After all, Mercedes have had a track record of messing things up in qualifying and get one of those drivers going out in the first part of qualifying. Colapinto made it through, but at the end of the day, the two kick Saubers were at the bottom. Half a second separating them, which is, have to say, is a poor showing for them, and definitely not what Joe Guanyu needs. Then we go to Q2, and Verstappen nearly crashed out of the session, but in the end it was his teammate Sergio Perez who was out of qualifying, and Verstappen managed to get a better qualifying than last year despite having a worse car. Meanwhile, Lando Norris nearly crashed himself out too, as he had a slide on his fast lap. McLaren needs everything he possibly could get though to do really well to close the championship. But at the end of the day, Colapinto was 7 thousandths behind his teammate, which either shows how good he is, or if we were all completely wrong about Albon. Speaking of being completely wrong, Carlos Sainz crashed into the barriers, and that was brilliant for him, the man who'd won last year in his final few races with Ferrari crashing out. Meanwhile, on run number 2, Lando Norris obliterated the field by 2 attempts to take pole from Verstappen and Hamilton. However, at the end of the day, didn't I mention that Sergio Perez would be on the podium? Yes, and he's P13, so that's amazing, isn't it? Anyway, it doesn't matter because we're ready to see Max Verstappen take the lead of the Grand Prix at the first corner anyway, so let's go into it. It turns out that Lando Norris did do a good enough job to maintain the lead off the launch of the line. Meanwhile, over 2021 title rivals Hamilton and Max Verstappen went side by side on the opening corner. However, despite starting on the soft compound tyre, Hamilton couldn't get ahead, and after Colapinto caused a colossal chain reaction, which meant Albon was down to 15th and was eventually out of the race on lap 16. That means that it's Albon's 4th DNF of the season. Speaking of DNFs, the Singapore Grand Prix was completely and utterly boring to make sure that everyone was falling asleep watching it, but then we all woke up on lap 29, Lando Norris nearly crashed out of the race and nearly ended the World Championship. Meanwhile, Oscar Piastri was on a charge after fighting Nico Hülkenberg on the opening lap. Had a fight with Lewis Hamilton and got picked off that Mercedes pretty much straight away. Hamilton was infuriated with the team's strategy, but it didn't take long for Piastri either to get past George Russell. This was not the result Mercedes would have wanted, and it was a complete disaster for them. Meanwhile, just like in 2023, Lando Norris rubbed the corner that so fatally took out George Russell on the last lap of the Singapore Grand Prix last year, but this time it was Norris who just brushed it slightly. Huge opportunity though for the others as Kevin Magnussen hit the barriers. Matt Hulkenberg's in a brilliant opportunity for Haas, but instead Kevin Magnussen does what you would all do on a F1 comeback and hit the wall and retire from the Singapore Grand Prix. Speaking of retiring, it looks as if it would be Daniel Ricciardo's last F1 race and managed to grab the fastest lap on the last lap to deny McLaren a full suite of points. But that's just getting to the end and getting ahead of ourselves, as George Russell also rubbed the wall as he pushed the limits and boundaries of his Mercedes. But at the end of the day, nothing stopped Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, with Oscar Piastri in third and Hamilton a disappointed P6. Mercedes was so ill after the race, they couldn't even do their post-race interviews. It's also impossible to mention this without even talking about that protest Max Verstappen made in the press conference when he refused to answer pretty much any question, and he was very clever that he's got away with that and hasn't got a penalty from it. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of the Singapore Grand Prix. Was it boring? Was it amazing? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time on F1 Hub.